Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of jazz, checking out a specific artist I've never heard of before. That is Kyle Hollingsworth. I really like the name of this album. It's called Never Odd or Even. The track we're looking at is Not Yet. So let's see what Kyle is bringing to the table today with Not Yet. Ooh, really spicy suspended chords there. Interesting. Yeah, we went from something a little bluesy to samba. This is what? Really like this elongated walking bass line. It's not just quarter notes, it has differing rhythmic values to it. Yeah, that is a very traditional guitar line for jazz. What a smooth chordal transition there. Like I pointed out yesterday, check out the drums. A lot of cymbal work. Snare primarily used for accents. Really confused about this section. For a second it felt like it was the bass solo, but the piano was too loud. Now it's certainly the piano solo, but I'm not sure about the 8-ish bars that came before it. Very cool. Was that a hi-hat roll there at the end? That was tight. Yeah, that was yeah. I'm digging that. This is 2004. Definitely came out a long time after I um oh, 2004. It's so weird to think that that was almost 2 decades ago. No, 2004 I was in high school. I was still playing jazz. I was going to say that this came out a while after I stopped paying attention to new music, but no. This came out while I was still performing jazz. Huh. Time's so weird. Anyways, phenomenal work though. I got to check real quick. Most recent album is 2018. Most recent single is 2022. Still making music. I'm gonna have to check this dude out. 'Cause that was great. Kind of lost me a little bit there, um, in a couple of places, but I think by the end of the track, it all kind of it came together. So this is modern jazz that still has one foot left in jazz history. It's very much a traditional jazz track with some modern ideas to it. Um, Primarily, we're looking at an AABA structure. We do have two repetitions of our pre-composed section into our solo section, and we wrap it all up with a return to our pre-composed part. Um, and even our solos are very rooted in, very traditional jazz solos. There's some suspended chords in there that give it some of that jazz bite. When you hear it, and you're like, ooh, that's kind of spicy, kind of jazzy. Whenever you hear that kind of sound, if you think to yourself, that's kind of jazzy. That's usually what's going on there. Um, those jazz chords love suspended notes. Um, and it's just a very palatable jazziness. And I have to put that caveat there because I'm not going to say it's entirely palatable. It isn't like, pop music or radio rock that has a very wide audience for it, a very generic kind of sound. Uh, jazz is one of those genres that there's nothing aggressive to this, nothing that really pushes against modern conventions, which is where the palatable comes in. But I think a lot of people are still going to kind of bounce off of the solo section, so I have to put it's palatable jazz. What I find most interesting is actually our A section, which is the opposite of how I typically feel about jazz, which is that the A section is there to facilitate the getting to the solos, which would be the more interesting aspect, especially in a live setting. But here, the A section, it's it's intriguing, and this is the modern part to me. You see, a lot of the times when I think of jazz standards, the classics, the ones everybody knows, and the ones that, as a jazz musician, especially if you're a gigging jazz musician, the ones you're supposed to know by heart so that at any moment you can play it, which is actually a real thing. If you're a gigging jazz musician, you better know your standards. Otherwise, I think you're going to have a hard time getting gigs. But anyways, the thing is that a lot of the A sections are very minimal. They are there to provide a hook and to, like I kind of said, facilitate getting into the solo section, which is the meat of a lot of jazz standards. But for this, I found our A section, our pre-composed part, to be exceptionally interesting. It didn't feel like it was just there because that's what jazz does. It had its own kind of flair. In fact, it feels quite divorced from the solo section. While those were fairly palatable and within traditional jazz sounds, this kind of had a little bit of maybe even a proggy influence on it. It it shifted between two or kind of three different vibes. The third vibe was kind of between the two, but we had a bluesier section and something a bit more syncopated that kind of felt more samba-y. And we found a way to combine both of those for our third section that led us into our solo and what took us out of our solo section before returning back to um, the shifting samba and blues. Um, and it left me kind of confused because the song starts and we got this really nice bluesy idea going on, and we're there for like 4 bars maybe, and then we shift to this blues, and we shift to the samba. And the thing with samba is that it's syncopated, it's upbeat, it's dancey. Blues is more downbeat. It's kind of somber, and you can feel that push and pull going on in these two sections of the track. I honestly had no idea. I thought we were in for another interesting track, much like the Mingus one and Sun Ra. Nope, not Sun Ra. Was Mingus our only one this week that was in primarily all pre-composed? Let me check real quick. Oh, yeah, Bad Bad Not Good was pre-composed, but it wasn't a difficult listen. So yeah, I guess it was just Charles Mingus's on Tuesday when we checked out the Mode D, E, and F medley. Um, just a difficult listen. And that's what I thought we were in for. A pre-composed jazzy song that was going to push the boundaries of music and was really going to make me, give me a difficult time analyzing it. And then we shifted back to the blues. We went back to the samba, and then we hit this third section. It was kind of a split between the two, which I honestly have no idea because they're so different. Like I said, one's downbeat and mellow, the other one's upbeat and dancey, and somehow they found a middle ground there. I don't know. I'm just gonna give them credit for that. I don't know how they did it. I can't explain it, but they did. um, and then we hit the solo section. I was like, okay, the song's starting to make sense now. I can see the pattern forming. I'm still not entirely sure what exactly our A section is supposed to be. The song's called Not Yet. And I think that even just that idea right there can be viewed in so many different metaphorical ways here. I mean, the bluesy section could be sad, but we're not going to be sad yet. Let's go dance tonight kind of vibe. Or, I mean, it could be related to anything in this idea of negativity, but not yet. And it doesn't even have to be negativity, it could just be a typically viewed negative emotion. Sadness is not negativity, but most people don't want to be sad, if that makes sense. Um, and that's about the best read that I have off of our verse. Something interesting about it, though, that I really want to point out is one, instrumentation. I think this is our first track, the only track this week that doesn't feature horns. This is entirely a rhythm section. And it's interesting. Apple lists this as a rock song. That's not inaccurate. In fact, when you're reading jazz sheet music, it typically tells you the style of jazz at the top of the page. You'll have the title of the song and the composer of the song, maybe the arranger of the song, and then it will say samba or swing or blues or rock. Rock is actually a subgenre of jazz. Now, it's not the rock you're thinking of, but there is a rock style that exists in traditional jazz. And I'm talking, even, well, I guess it's sort of related to jazz fusion, but so I don't think it's technically wrong. This feels like a rock song as far as jazz goes, especially given that we don't have horns. This is a rock band. We have a drummer, a bassist, a guitarist, and a pianist. I mean, not every rock band has a pianist, but if you make that a keyboard, that kind of fills out some subset of rock. but I don't know if I would call it rock. To me, this is still jazz. But I got way off topic there. The instrumentation, there's no horns in this. And I think that's interesting because it does kind of lend itself a little bit more towards the rock sensibilities. Primarily, we have a guitar solo and a piano solo and a drum solo, things we could find in rock bands. We even have a little bit of guitar grit in our third section of our A, the mixed sorrow and samba. The sorrow and samba, the S&S section. The guitar goes into overdrive a little bit. It's not a lot, but it's grittier than I hear in most jazz. I just want to say that. Now, granted, it doesn't stick around, and when the guitarist decides to take their solo, they go for clean electric, as is pretty standard, but it was neat to hear a little bit of grit there. In the place of that, though, the rhythm section actually doesn't do anything different. Which, at least to me, is really interesting. You're removing the instruments that typically take lead and not really changing anything to replace that. The bass plays a walking bass line. It's a little elongated. There's some held out notes rather than constant quarter notes, but it's still just following a pattern while chasing the chord or solidifying the chord, however you want to view that. Our guitarist is doing these little chordal vamps. Very, very typical muted jazz guitar. You can find this in a lot of jazz music that started incorporating electric guitar. It's just these little muted chords in a rhythmic pattern. And our pianist is kind of doing what pianos do. They're the jack of all trades. They're kind of filling in a lot of different roles, but it's a very minimal melody that the piano is laying down. There really would typically be a horn section on top of this, and there's not. Instead, we shift modes frequently, which is what gives us our movement. We're in a bluesy mode for 8 bars, and then we're in a samba mode for 8 bars, and then a bluesy mode, and then a samba mode, and then hey, there's a distorted guitar, and now we're into the solo section. So it's interesting because I can kind of feel flow and direction, almost like there's a melodic line to our verse, but I don't think there really was a strong one. It's interesting. I got to go back and listen to this again now that I'm not paying more attention, but figuring out, digesting the A section. I want to give it another listen when I'm done with this. It's intriguing. Anyways, that brings us to our solo section. And I really like this. We start off with the clean electric guitar. There is really nothing in the solo here that is out of the norm, at least from my listening experience. It is a very typical jazz solo. Some nice pacing to it. Excellent use of spicy notes. There is a turn that happens like every 6 bars, and we get a nice chordal shift to wrap up our 8-bar phrase. And every time it comes up to it, it's just it's such a good idea. And it's not just the guitarist; the pianist dives into this as well. But it's such a good chord that they decide to go on to before resolving back down to the root. It's just so good. Anyways, though, again, there's nothing really here that stands out to me. It's just a really nice, well done solo. And then I get confused, though. It feels like the bass is soloing. In fact, well, I don't know. It's changed up its rhythmic and melodic ideas. The notes are being played differently, but I can't tell if it's supposed to be the spotlight or not because the piano is doing its own thing as well, and it's overpowering the bass. Um, and it's hitting spicier and spicier and spicier triads. And it is just getting very powerful and abrasive and dissonant. And then we lead into the piano solo. And the piano solo was, again, much like the guitar solo, very palatable. I wouldn't say there was anything odd about it, but it was this middle point that confused me. What was the piano doing? Was that part of the solo? Did the piano solo start prior to what I thought it did? What was the bass doing there when it changed up its ideas? Was this actually a transition between two solos? I don't know. Maybe a second listen would help, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure I heard and understood what was going on there. I just don't know how to interpret it. But then we do our piano solo again, very nice, very palatable. Some really great ideas in there. We go to our drum solo. And this one is interesting because it's constant. It's very different from the drum solo we heard yesterday in the Sun Ra track. This is a constant. This is more like a rock solo, actually, where the drums are constantly going. And something that's really nice, and you'll actually hear this a lot if you dive more into jazz, is the drummer segmenting their solo with these big full band stingers, which is what happened. Like every two bars or whatever, we'd have the full band come in with a unified rhythmic idea, like bop 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 bop, bop 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 bop, right? And so there's something very jazzy about this this drum solo right here. I also enjoyed how it was restrained but full bodied. Lots of tom work in here, lots of snare work, lots of bass kick work, but it wasn't overdone. We weren't pushing to like 30-second notes or anything like that, like we would in rock. And that's not to say that it isn't impressive, but jazz, like I've mentioned several times about the drumming, is more about finesse than brute force. And so listening to a lot of these smaller details that the drummer put into this, yeah, it's just a great drum solo. And then we come out of that and do our A section again. Now what's interesting here is that I don't know how to feel about this one. Um, our B section feels so far divorced from our A section. I don't have a good read on the A section, and our B section was just uh, well done iterative jazz soloing. It's interesting that the A section feels pushed into new boundaries while our B section feels so firmly rooted in norms and tradition. And I don't know what to make of that, but I'm trying to just pair it with the title of Not Yet. Change that isn't happening. Will, but is not now. And so we have these shifting A section, right? We have the downbeat blues and the upbeat samba. But then we also have traditional soloing with non-traditional verses. And I feel like a lot of it is just this duality of things might be different, but they're not. Things might be changing, but they're not. Yet, the other side is present. It's looming, so to speak, but it's not happening now. And maybe that's what this is about. It's about finding that middle ground between metamorphosis, that middle point where it's kind of Schrodinger's change. It has, but it hasn't actually happened yet. The song is new, but it's also traditional. The song is a little sad, but it's also dancey. It's kind of consistently two things, or at least it explores two opposing ideas. Maybe that's what it's about. There's also even a duality in the album title, Never Odd or Even. Although I suppose that's not a really duality. That suggests a third state, an impossible third state. I don't know. Those are my thoughts on Kyle Hollingsworth's Not Yet. I am intrigued. I'm going to have to check out more of this dude's work. And I'm kind of not ashamed. I'm saddened, though, that I hadn't heard this name prior. I would have eaten this up in high school when it came out. Um, So yeah, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on this track. Anything that stands out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on, or whatever. Above the comments is a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can find ways to support the channel, find ways to get to the Discord community, to email me, check out the music I make, so much more. Check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. So that wraps it up for Jazz Week, which is now over, but we still have 2 more videos today for creator request. Tomorrow there is typically scheduled a album reaction. If you saw my community post at the beginning of the week, though, that won't be happening. It's been postponed to next week. Sunday, we will have a live stream. It'll be a short one. I think we only have 4 songs for it. That'll be for the patrons. Being that it's so short, I might actually even get it up that night, EST, so probably early in the morning for anybody east of me. European, Asian fans. If not, though, well, I'm just gonna. It'll be up Monday morning my time, which is when I always get them up. If it's earlier and you want to check if it's earlier, that's fine too. Actually, if you have notifications, I don't even know why I'm rambling at this point. Monday we'll dive into next week's theme. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be interesting. I probably should check on these things more often. I just kind of let things roll, and when it comes to Monday, I'm like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be checking out. All right, I am rambling though. Let's wrap this up. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.